next session came about halfway during the year. I was very frustrated because CES has a tendency to talk about, hey, look how cool our stuff is. Look how cool our technology is. And I was starting to get frustrated because I know for a fact that many CEOs and many companies are struggling with adoption. In this space, in adoption for the boomer/senior space. So Eric, Taub, and I got on the phone and we just started talking about it. And I said to him, who really wants this crap anyway? Who wants it? And I said, what if we did a session about that? What's going on? Is there something going wrong? What are the areas? So I thought, what a really fun way to debate what is really going on, and I keep hearing that seniors aren't afraid of it, and are we developing the right technology? So I am extremely excited by what I call the dream team that is on this stage. That is going to take some time to really kind of get into this, and there'll probably be some differing ideas as we hope, but we welcome the conversation. So I'm going to introduce Eric, who by the way, also is going to be doing a book signing tomorrow. It's got a really great book called Does This Plug Into That? And it is a buying guide for consumer tech. So definitely check that out. So back to my mottos. Eric's motto, when things aren't going so well, perhaps we should do what we do regularly dry mouth. Perhaps we should do what we do regularly to our computers. Just shut down, take a deep breath, and start fresh.
Hello, everyone. This is a topic that's of particular interest to me because, as Jill just mentioned, I have a book being published this week. Does this plug into that? And what it is it's a book about technology for people who either hate technology or can't figure it out. And without exception, every time I mentioned that I was doing this book to anybody, everyone said, oh, I need that book, whether the person was 30 years old or 80 years old. And I realized that there's a real need out there for to find a way to better understand technology. It really befuddles everybody, perhaps with the exception of people in this audience. And I've seen how our ability to use technology changes, of course, as we get older. I write about technology, and yet my 5-year-old grandson gets impatient with me and drags my eye. I have a family member who 10 years ago would roll her eyes at her husband's inability to use his television remote. And now she calls me up on an almost weekly basis to say, I need a new television. And what happened is I go there and usually I have to put the input onto HDMI. Or reprogram the remote because she pushed the wrong button. So here's a person who once could do things that she took as normal, and now it's befuddling. On the other hand, technology has incredible opportunities to help the elderly. I know that when my mother died at almost 101, in the last week of her life, we were able to use Skype to have her see her great-grandchildren that she had never met. This is a person who was born before radio. So we can see how technology can really transform lives, but how do we get there? And are seniors always destined to be one step behind younger people in terms of their ability to use it? The person sitting to your right, to my left, has a particularly interesting view of all of this because Steve Mayer has really been involved in technology for a good number of years and continues to be so. Steve is the co-founder of Atari and also was one of the people who was responsible for creating the world's first video game console. So Steve really knows a lot about consumer technology, and he still is involved in it. So Steve, let me ask you, what are some of the issues we need to deal with here? Can we create technologies that older people can use well and want to use?
Well, thank you, and this is particularly interesting.
Could you use the mic, please? Sure.
Okay, thank you very much. This reminds me very much of discussions that we had at Atari and the CE space about 25 years ago about can girls and women use technology. And one of the things that we're going to deal with in this panel here, we have to be very careful, is about stereotypes for this very reason. That TI did an experiment with a calculator, and they modified a calculator so that it gave the wrong answers. And 25 years ago, when they would give the calculators to boys and men, they say, this calculator is a piece of junk, and it doesn't work. When they give the calculators to girls and women, the women would say, what am I doing that's wrong? We've passed a lot of that now that there's not that same discussion. 25 years ago, my wife suggested to Atari that they do games for girls and women. And the head of Atari said, why would we want to have the audience? And she said, well, I rather thought that we were doubling the audience. So I think we can look at the discussions now with seniors and elderly, and it's sort of recapitulating those same discussions. We're over the threshold now. The majority of players of video games are women rather than men. The types of games have changed to match the motivational issues of that, some of which are gender specific. The nerdiest factor of working with games and computers has disappeared. So a lot of the threshold problems of accepting of girls and women into technology have disappeared. And also the requirement to do special games for girls and women, special technology, has disappeared to a fair extent. And that's particularly important in the consumer space because consumer electronics people want to make one unit that reaches the broadest audience. So it doesn't require a special audience now. So I think we can go back, this is a long answer, but I think we can go back and look at the migration and the adoption of based on gender 25 years ago and how those thresholds have disappeared. And I think it allows us a pretty positive answer about how things are going to happen in the future for seniors. I want to make a little distinction between seniors and those people that have significant impairments physiologically, sociologically, emotionally, and things like this. But I think we can see the migration path happening through the normal adoption cycles.
And I think, of course, also when we talk about seniors, how do you lump one group into a very large age group into one category? People over 65 are said to be seniors, so they're not the same as people in their 90s. Dr. Aenor Sawyer, 2 individuals down, is the Associate Director for the Center of Digital Health Innovation at the University of California, San Francisco. And you're directly involved in creating some apps for the older population, health apps. Can you talk about your work and what you're finding in terms of acceptance?
Yeah. Are the mics on?
Everyone else is fine, it's just your mic.
Just me.
Okay, great. Can you hear me all right? So the Center for Digital Health Innovation at UCSF is involved really in the broad umbrella in digital health, which we don't consider just a modality like device, therapeutics, diagnostics. We actually think of it as the great communicator. So we work in large data and data analytics all the way down to smart device, implantables, wearables, and apps in between. And I think a couple of key points are we think it's really important to have frontlines innovators, so people at the front lines of healthcare and life sciences, meaning provider and patient and family, they're all at the front lines of it. Because we can identify real pain points, we definitely need to partner with all of you to get across the arc of development and translate the ideas out in and scale them up out into the greater sector. So, but we do think that there's a place for us at the table, and so we're trying to foster that within our academic medical center. one of the things we're trying to really pinpoint is bringing the concept of know your audience in much earlier in the process, not when you've done all the mapping out and you just want to make it look nice. We don't consider design a luxury or an aesthetic. It's actually a part of finding out who your audience is and segmenting them, as you said earlier. And so you're really identifying who's the user. And it's not a new concept, but we want it to be not an exception in digital health anymore, not just something you layer on when you have your second round of funding, but you actually put it in very early in the planning. So we're adding design in, and so we use the nickname KYA, which we hope is replacing CYA in healthcare. And so it's know your audience. And I think that's a big part of whether people are going to use things or not, is were they considered in the actual design and development of it? And considered is one piece of it. The other piece of it is we think that whoever the audience is, particularly seniors in this case, should be active participants and collaborators in the defining the problem and designing and developing it. So we're working in that aspect as well.
That's very interesting because, you know, we see that often video games are designed by young people. So therefore, should products for the elderly be and is almost designed by people for whom the product is directed. By the way, I'd like anybody to jump in whenever we're talking. Please don't hesitate. But in terms of the topic of design, Peter Falt is the Director of Creative Consulting at the BMW Group. Now, even though it's called the BMW Group, they don't just design cars. They are involved in product design for a lot of different industries, including healthcare. And Peter, would you talk about some of the things that you're finding when you look at design criteria for older people in technology?
Sure, happy to. Firstly, I couldn't agree more with what you said, and that was one of the main topics that I wanted to make about design, and just speak generally about design for a second, I guess, regardless of the industry. Because I do think that design brings a certain sensibility to the equation. And that's really design thinking or certainly from a design perspective. And really what that comes down to is empathy. And if you can get to a certain place of empathy and understanding who that user or that customer is, then you're really going to literally get into the skin and create those solutions that are appropriate to that particular market, whether it be a physical disability, paralysis or arthritis or something like that that is independent of age, or a mental condition or whatnot. So the solutions at that point, once you're in that place of empathy, can actually be fairly simple.
And how do you get that empathy?
Observation, inclusion, of course, and that's a certain type of research, but a design-focused type of research where you're trying to come up with solutions that obviously serve and match the needs and the desires and the values of that target audience.
Are there any specific things you found recently when you're designing products for the elderly that worked and didn't or did not work that you thought might have had the opposite effect?
Well, I think, again, the empathy is required because we can very easily come at it from a perspective of all-knowing and the way it should be, right? Fits the equation, objectively, there it is. But the thing of late that was most compelling to me is we created a solution that we thought was good, but really the conclusion was you're going to have someone who wants to adopt that or not. And it's not a one-size-fits-all. Particularly as you get older, even individuals who are in their 90s, you find people who have a strong appetite to embrace a tablet or something and get up on that learning curve versus others exactly the same age and demographic who just have no interest in it. And so I think you have to get right down to that level to understand if there's even an interest in that adoption instead of saying you have to do this in order to stay up with it.
Right. And I know, Steve, when you and I were talking, I think actually when all of us were speaking previously, you had mentioned there was a finding about the use of ATM machines with the elderly. Could you talk about what?
It turned out there was two big problems for the adoptions of ATM machines for the elderly. One was the network effect, because the elderly didn't know what the value of the ATMs were. But the biggest adoption problem was that the elderly, often their only contact once a day or once a week was with the teller with the bank. So we were actually taking something away from them. So it changed the value equation. I just also want to pick up one thing on know your audiences. At Atari, we took it one step further of not only understanding the video game player, but we also wanted to understand every step in the channel of how to deliver it. So we became distributors, we became operators. So in the healthcare, understand every step in delivering of the healthcare, the healthcare worker, the retailer that's going to be selling this device. So it's understanding all your complete audience.
And that audience is really, I'm sorry, Jody, do you want to jump in?
Well, I was just going to say you raised what I think is a really key point. First of all, my motto is don't let facts get in the way. Context is everything. And the context here is that for most of the time, we're creating these technologies that force people to adapt to the technology. The technologies don't adapt to people's lives. And until that is the case, so for example, in the last panel, there was an example given about the first word processor. Well, everybody could relate to that. You did it the same way. It had a keyboard, et cetera, but the value proposition was right. It was simply giving you something else to do what you were doing anyway. What your behavior didn't have to change. It actually adapted to you. What we see here, is that so often the technologies come in and somebody has to act on it. In the health and in the independent living stuff, everybody is much clearer about the value proposition for the adult child than they are the value proposition for the end user. And, which is one reason that I'm a fan of Lively, because it is passive, it's in the background, it's very, non-interventionist, going on. My touch point for all of this is Star Trek. And, the first communicator was, Bluetooth was Lieutenant Uhuru in 1965. The first tablet I remember was Picard in 1980, reading his books. The whole issue of voice recognition and the computer, all of these technologies simply made what you were doing anyway easier, which is one reason why I think the television is actually going to be the thing as it transforms. It is that thing that people have familiarity with, and I think it's even more so the case as you get older. The last thing I just want to say on this is that it's more than health, right? This is true for everything. Boomers and seniors want to live life. They don't just want to live independently. It's about living, not aging. And that means, and there's a reason why you see the adoption of things like, the iPad and then, even Android tablets, and how that's, been adopted by older people, because it's intuitive. A 5-year-old or an 85-year-old can use it. We've always used the phrase design for all. Build that into the front end of the product, and what do? You max out your market opportunity. The TV remote that you have to, you live in New York, you have to come over to my house, to help me, with my remote. That's designed for none. Nobody can figure the damn thing out. And, I'm not ashamed to say I had to get Geek Squad in to, when they were doing the other stuff in my house to take care of that, so I didn't have 19 remotes. So, but people want to live their lives. There's going to be online education that's going to be part of this. It's travel. When you go onto Kayak, and here's a technology. There's nothing on Kayak, despite the fact 50% of all leisure travel is done by people over 50, 80% of luxury leisure travel. You look at these websites, they have nothing to do with the life of a person who's their customer. So know your customer, but also look beyond health and design into the front end, so that it enhances life as opposed to makes life adapt to it.
By the way, Jody is, this is who you just heard from Jody Holtzman, who's the Senior VP of Thought Leadership at AARP. So he's directly involved a lot with these issues. But when you say design for your audience, that brings up an interesting point that we had a conversation a couple of months ago with the head of a assisted living home who was very interested in bringing in new technologies. And he said, don't worry about the people who live here. We just want the technologies to sell to the adult children because they're going to come in here and go, ooh, look at all this stuff. This is great. Mom, you'll love it. Right? And then leaves all the older people who are actually going to be using this stuff in the dust. So do we wind up, or do you as designers or business owners get caught in that place where you say, well, I don't really need to worry about the people who will actually use it because that's not my audience really.
Yeah. Well, know yours. I mean, where's the quirky, for, tech and boomers and seniors? Where's the open innovation models, that actually brings in, and maybe this is what's happening in your effort, but, you have to bring in, the end user.
Right.
And Stephen, I think this is a good time for you to jump in here. This is Stephen Ewell, who is the executive director of the CEA Foundation, which I think you should explain, even though it has the acronym CEA in it. It's not just about CEA. So why don't you talk about what you're doing? And I know you've just recently funded a number of ventures in this whole area.
Sure, and yes, the CEA Foundation is the charitable organization that's affiliated with the Consumer Electronics Association, which is the organization putting together CES. And yes, the CEA Foundation is a fairly new organization. We launched in June of 2012, and we've supported a number of organizations that are using consumer electronics to make a difference in people's lives, whether people with disabilities or seniors. So, and I think, I think everyone on the stage now has brought up one of the key points here. It's what is the value of the technology? And I think that's something that we're really seeing. You mentioned your mother being able to get on Skype and seeing that. I've seen that with my family as well. It's people who have not used technology at all of a sudden, I can see my grandkids from across the country. That's very interesting to people. So it's finding that value. One of the organizations that we supported, actually, they're in the room, Older Adults Technology Services in New York. They have the Senior Planet Center where seniors can come in, they can experience technology, they have classes and education, they can learn what is the value of these types of technologies and try to figure out what is going to work best for them. Another organization that we've worked with is Self-Help Community Services, which has a virtual senior center for homebound seniors that can get engaged, be able to tour the world from their apartment if they're not able to leave and see the benefits that can come out of that. And also a lot of the work that we've been doing with the disability community, American Foundation for the Blind, the Hearing Loss Association of America, that all has direct impact on seniors as well as broader communities. So I think there's a lot of opportunities that come with this. I think here at the show this year, Internet of Everything is a huge term that you're going to see thrown around a lot. I wear a fitness tracker that I know a lot of people we really predict that that's going to become more and more common over the next year. And I think as we design those types of technologies, I think that's going to have a benefit for seniors as well.
Yeah, I wanted to add, I think these are all great comments, and one of the things that we try to talk a lot about is effective healthcare solutions really require two things to think about. One is they're combinations of people, personnel, and process, not just, technology, personnel, and process, not just technology. So when you're designing, incorporating those things, and we try to change the term from designing to or for to designing with. And then you automatically have to incorporate whoever is going to be the user. And I think that as we look more and more, it's so obvious that it's either going to be what's already being done by a person, what's in their, a term I use is called life flow rather than workflow, what's in their life flow. There are a lot of numbers now showing that the greatest increase in users for Facebook are in the older demographic. So maybe there's a segment there where their healthcare interventions or deliveries or support systems and clinical decision support should come through their social media rather than other mechanisms. There are other groups who, I like to make up names for things, who I call the geriactive who are, going to continue to be very mobile, very engaging in multitasking events, and they may prefer to have things on platforms and have sensors and things like that. So again, making it, involving the users is key.
Are there any, sorry.
Well, it was just, this isn't, from a design perspective, it's not new. It goes back to universal design, need-based design. Once you really understand the lowest common denominator, you can create the most simple and elegant solution that can scale up in all of this. But I think what's different now is literally the technology as the enabler. Whereas before, to create a solution for a particular segment would be costly and wouldn't have the return. Now you can do it fairly inexpensively and do it better than you ever could before. But it's interesting that here we are in 2014 having this discussion, and pioneers like Victor Papanak and were scoffed about looking and using design to solve social and real world problems like this. And so it's really nice to be able to see technology kind of turn that tide and to serve people and to create social solutions that are much better than we ever could before.
But there's two different categories I've always said is that there's an absolutely humongous bucket for products and services that have a particular pain point and use case having to do with aging. It's growing, the demographics are going to drive that, the solutions are far from there. The bigger opportunity for startups and actually all the consumer electronics industry, to me, gets back to what you were saying, is to build usability, whether it's universal design, human-centered design, design for all, call it what you will, to build that into the front end, right? More iPads, fewer TV remotes. The TV remote is a business decision that we don't care that it's this difficult to program your TV. We're not going to, this isn't where we're going to invest our money. When you see, Gary Kay's in the audience and he asked a question before, and he's been very good at just like pinpointing things like, why is it so hard and why does it go, you have to go through 9 steps to figure out how to increase the size of the thumbprints on your iPhone. Why not just voice activate it, make it bigger? Again, go back to Star Trek and just have that as your mental model of how easy it is. Because unless those underlying technologies really take a leap, when it comes to older people, I think that's going to continue to be a barrier. But I think it's actually a barrier for the market, as a whole. And for the corporates that are here, I think that's really where the opportunity is.
And I think it certainly gets worse as you get older, because when you're younger, you can adapt to new technology, figure things out. When you get older, you're sort of more set in your ways, and you can't figure anything out.
But that's if the technology is difficult to adapt to. Right. So my premise is that it shouldn't be, and frankly, we know enough now that it doesn't have to be. We've got 50 AARP members that currently are having a tour of the South Hall as we speak, and about 5 of them are going to be up here this afternoon doing a Shark Tank. We had thousands of people come through our exhibit where we were teaching them how to use tablets, how to use Facebook, how to use Twitter at our last event in Atlanta. It's a myth that people don't want to use this. The barriers are being thrown in their way. But that Skype conversation, FaceTime on your iPhone, that's really easy. Push one button and all of a sudden, if you're on an iPhone and I'm on an iPhone or a tablet, if it's an Apple product, that makes it really easy.
Well, and I think you're seeing a lot of innovation in this space where you have, the Xbox where you can control it via voice control. You're seeing that in a lot more space, such as Siri and Android devices have voice control as well. That's innovating right now. That's something that you're going to see more and more as we move forward. So I do think you're going to see that. Is it Star Trek at this point? I'd love to be able to walk up to my wall and order my dinner and pull it right out. 3D printing's big here too. Maybe in a couple years that'll be the case. But
I
I
want
do
them to just create the chef.
But I do think that this is something that we are seeing some innovation around. You do have various set-top box extensions, whether it's the Apple TV, the Roku device, other ones like that, which are, you look at those remotes and it's 1 or 2 buttons in many cases. Chromecast, exactly. In many cases, you're able to use your phone or your tablet to control your TV, control your whole home audio system. So a lot of these things are being developed. Yes, in many cases, you have the remote as well, but some people, as you mentioned, some people are comfortable with a certain type of technology and may want to keep that technology while also having the opportunity to move to additional options as well.
I think there's sort of 3 trends that are making this better. One is the transferability of your experience. So once you've learned to work on an iPhone or something like this, and now it's transferable into so many other aspects of your life. The second thing is, we talked about innovation. The cost now to do an iPhone app or to do a custom plastic device to turn it into an assisted device, the cost of innovation, the cost of getting it out has dropped dramatically. And the third thing is that because of things like the Google Glass and elite athletes wearing blades and things like this, that technology is no longer that headset in your ear that separates you from society, but it's now becoming cooler and assisted. So technology is not separating you from the rest of the community, but it's part of the community. So I think these are all things so that we always have this problem with technology. Joseph Campbell used to say that the metaphor for computers was the Old Testament God. If your offering was not acceptable, it would take your firstborn. And he said, what if the metaphor from the beginning of DOS had been an Earth Mother? I'm sorry, dear, it was so close. Could you try again? So this will be a continuing thing of making it easier, but there's a lot of things that are converging now to making this affordable, easy to use, and bringing people back into society rather than feeling they're separated by their disabilities or their aging.
Yeah.
I think also it needs to be easy. It needs to be accessible, which also means affordable. It also needs to be rewarding for people to embrace it. And rewarding in a lot of sense, the older patients I work with, it usually comes in terms of, is it empowering for them? Are they able to maintain dignity, choice, ability, or substitute with technology for some ability that they've lost, or a new process or some personnel? It's the reward piece of it, as well as those front-end pieces that we need to pay attention to. And I think that whole idea of empowerment it's demonstrated in a lot of the things that we're working with now in digital health and device, like you mentioned some of them, but a simple example is discharge planning, and I try to move away from this passive idea more to the patient or the person being active in their process and their outcome. So one example is open placement, which I think many people have heard of, and it helps discharge planners help people find the next place to live, even if it's temporary, from a hospital to a subacute setting to their home, or maybe from their home to in a permanent transition to a higher support area. And it was first designed for the professionals to use and really place people. And now they've pivoted, and they're now letting the consumer, the patient, even those who know they're having surgery in the pre-op area, letting the patient now log on, searching sites, showing their preferences, helping them rank. And so it makes a lot more sense. So now those people and the professionals are working together to find the solutions. And I think we're going to be able to measure huge benefits from that. Probably even readmission rates will be benefited by that, and discharging on time. That gets to the point that I really want to bring up, is that to build effective healthcare solutions, we must have evaluation. And we have a lot of things being built that aren't going through rigorous processes of evaluation, including the first step, which is the focus user group. Evaluation comes in many forms, and I really think that as people are building and developing, if they could keep in mind that they need to evaluate all the way along the way so that we end up with an effective solution at the end.
And in addition to focus groups, what should we be doing?
Well, so there are many different steps to evaluation. We're actually holding a conference at UCSF in the mid-year on this because there haven't been any on digital health research methodologies. It's a growing field. But the point is you start early on with that focus user group idea, but then you evaluate with your early piloting. It could just be exposure to a concept, proof of concept, but you want to look for engagement, sustained engagement. Does it actually translate to a behavior change? Not is it just downloaded, but does it change behavior? And then does that change in behavior translate to a health outcome that you would benefit from?
But I don't think it's just, the formal focus group. So, one thing that we've experimented with at our last two events here in Vegas and most recently in Atlanta is we've just created an exhibit of startups and have brought in AARP members to just have the opportunity over 3 days to just interact with these entrepreneurs and to comment. They're not short of opinions, as you may know if you know your parents. We've had things as basic as somebody doing a new PERS device, a company called Qmetic, and an older person, a woman, saying, if you want me to wear that, you better glam it up. Had nothing to do with the technology. It was ugly as sin. And it was like the very notion that, and here you had a couple of 20-somethings out of MIT who were brilliant, but the aesthetic, was just second. And it could have been the greatest thing since sliced bread, but, the blind spot was you're talking to people. You're talking to people who want to look nice, And so, getting that type of upfront, interaction, I think, can take many, many forms.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and that also comes down to understanding the values of your target audience, not just the needs, not just the functional needs, what do they want to do. And I think there is, again, you mentioned at the beginning, let's not stereotype, right? I mean, there are so many uniquenesses to everything that we're talking about here from the different types of people. And when you get into milieus and segmentation, you really try and understand that. But I think that not all of this has to be a DIY thing, right? I mean, really, when you look at luxury, a lot of this is having someone do it for me. And so that's why I mentioned that there was a bit of surprise where we found really an exact fit, a great solution, and a good % of the people just didn't want it. Just no appetite. But they wanted the engagement. They wanted the end result. And so this gets back to going from product solutions and innovation solutions to services too, right? And back to that, I mean, all big companies are dealing with customer support. As even we get in there and get hung up, you need that outreach, and then, wow, somebody can bring clarity like that, can't they? Because they can either grab a hold of your thing, do it for you, or whatnot. So almost back to the Star Trek, as a lot of this does go back to the background, and I just get the end result of what I want, it takes a lot of the device and a lot of the technology that we're talking about just out of the equation. And that's not a utopia in the way that it's going to be, I believe. But the point is that you have to understand that, again, it's not a force fit. People don't have to stay up on the ever ephemeral track of technology in order to benefit from it. And I think we just really have to stay sensitive in order to create great solutions on the big scale.
You raised a really interesting point, which is that it's not just a box, right? It's not just a tangible product, that there's an ecosystem behind it. Why do I love Apple Care? Because that person will stay on the phone with me for 4 hours until
it's relatively cheap.
The thing gets fixed. For our call centers, people get trained by gerontologists. And the first thing they get told is expect to be on the phone longer, right? So, the whole issue of who are the people that you're going to call, is one thing. And, several companies now are experimenting with call centers that are completely made up of, boomers and seniors, who pull up to the call center in their golf cart down in Phoenix.
Or doing it from
things
home.
like that, rather than, somebody from Mumbai.
Yeah.
No, that's a great idea, and I think in the past, a lot of things got decided based on expediency, and often engineers made design decisions. I wrote a book about Ford a number of years ago, and they said to me, "Do you know how we figure out where to put the air conditioning ducts?" I said, "I don't know." So where it fits easiest for us to, where the hole can be placed most easily. And that's a crazy way to make design. Right. We've got about 5 minutes left, and we'd be happy to take some questions.
I see one right here.
Yeah.
Sir.
You mentioned the work.
That was weird.
You mentioned the work that AARP and a lot of the rest of you have done, and I think one of the ways that it would help entrepreneurs and startup companies is to somehow figure out how to feed that information of your focus groups, your user groups, your design criteria back to us. And in my mind, that would even start something as simple as giving us your email addresses so we could correspond with you. People that are in the proprietary market may not want to give away their study results, but the AARP, CEA, UCSF could be very helpful so that we don't keep trying to figure it out ourselves every time, but could take advantage of what. Do you do that? I'm assuming. I'd like to know how you could get that information to us.
Okay, so I'll pay you the $20 later. Thanks for setting that up.
It'll help me too.
Right. So our website for my group is the Thought Leadership Group. Our mission is to find ways for AARP to help stimulate innovation in the market that'll benefit people over 50. We're holding our third Health Innovation at 50 Plus live pitch event that Lisa Sunin made reference to a little earlier. But I would direct you to our webpage, which is, as you expect, aarp.org/innovation 0 PLUS. So Innovation 50 Plus. And there you will find a study that we did called Health Innovation Frontiers. And we looked at 9 different categories of consumer health, and it was a response to the marketplace when we said, look at the 50 plus, look at the 50 plus, there's over 100 million, they spend trillions and trillions of dollars, blah, blah, blah. And people said, I got it, you got my attention, now where should I focus? So this is a study that looks at and sizes the market, as well as looks at some of the strengths and weaknesses of the products and services that are in the market. There's both a 100-page report you can read. There's also a really nice infographic that you can download called Health Innovation Frontiers. We're going to be doing more of those. It's not going to come with the, my group is 3 people, and I won't tell you my budget, but it's not AARP's budget. But little by little, we see the need for these things, and we're going to be doing, more of them.
Also, if you Google seniors and technology, a fair number of the papers are all from AARP. It's an incredible resource.
Yeah, I'd also, point to Gary Kay's, website, the Boombox, in the Boombox, which, deals with consumer tech specifically.
Yeah, we're absolutely happy to partner and share our information. You can just go UCSF CDHI, Center for Digital Health Innovation. And what we'd really like to do is partner with industry. So we have meetings called Meetup of the Minds where we present problems from the different areas of pain points, and sometimes it is around seniors. There are a couple other resources that'd be really interesting for you. Center for Technology and Aging in Oakland, David Lindemann's group. He and I are working closely on building Center of Technology Innovation at UCSF. And I also think, but one of the things we're hoping to host this coming year is the 50 plus developer, not just for the 50 plus, but actually or originating out of that community. I think our seniors are our greatest untapped resource in this country. And I think that many of them, mind you, were the original makers. So having something like grandmakers instead of grandparents, and really creating an event where the ideas are coming from that sector is going to be an interesting event that we're going to put forth this year.
Yeah, as Vint Cerf, the father of the internet, says, we're not afraid of technology, we invented it.
And I'd just say, I know we're going to get cut off soon, but for CEAs, the CEA Foundation, ceafoundation.org is our website, but also give my email address out, sewell@ceafoundation.org. I'm happy to talk to people about this. We've done some work with the accessibility community around connecting them with industry and having discussions about the design of products. I'd love to do that more with the aging community as well. So please reach out to me, and I'd love to talk about how we can work together.
Awesome. Huge round of applause. I think this is just the beginning of the conversation.